Good evening. It's November 24th of 2015. We're here for a special Brattleboro Selectboard meeting. Good evening. We know that the meeting was officially warned because we convened at 5:15 and went into executive session to discuss contract matters. There were no decisions that were made during the executive session. We've risen from executive session, and now we're here for the public meeting. It's been a very busy set of weeks with the select board meeting every week, and I have no chair's remarks today about matters that are not on the agenda. So I guess I'll turn it over for the third item on the agenda, which is town manager's comments, if any.
And I also don't have anything that's off the agenda for this evening. Thank you.
Except to say happy holidays. We hope that everybody has a happy Thanksgiving and has a good and safe time with their families. Are there any select board comments or committee reports?
Do you want to remind people that the next police fire facilities discussion is on Wednesday the 2nd.
Actually, will be Monday the 30th. We'll be together at Academy School at 6 p.m. and then on Wednesday the 2nd at the middle school.
So two coming up quickly.
Yep.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from select board comments or committee reports? The next item on the agenda is public participation. Is there anybody who's in attendance at tonight's meeting who wants to speak to something that's not on the agenda? Hearing none, we have two primary sets of business for tonight's special meeting. The meeting was initially scheduled in order to have department presentations in connection with the budget for the police department, Department of Public Works, and Recreation and Parks. But given the current work that we've started with respect to the police fire facilities project, we decided to include on tonight's agenda and then on all subsequent agendas going forward, an item for police fire facilities discussion so that we can debrief to the extent that we feel it's necessary with respect to the meeting that we had this past Saturday, make any announcements and talk about any planning related issues or anything else that we want to talk about with respect to police fire. So the next item on the agenda is Police Fire Facilities Committee. I will note that we had our first meeting to present the various alternatives relating to the police fire project on Saturday morning at Green Street School. And we have meetings scheduled November 30th at
Academy School at 6 p.m.
At the Academy School at 6 p.m. and then on
December 2nd
December 2nd, Wednesday,
at the middle school at 6 p.m.
at BAMS. So we will hope to see anybody who couldn't come this past Saturday at our meetings after Thanksgiving, Monday and Wednesday. Everybody's invited to participate and to give us comments and thoughts. I would note, in terms of our process going forward, that there were comments that were made after the presentations on Saturday that led me to believe that it will be useful for us to schedule some additional time for discussion, even if it's at Tuesday select board meetings, to talk about specific items, to talk about the relationship between the police fire project funding and the operating budget, police fire project funding and long-term capital needs, how the a potential resiting of the police facilities might impact the municipal center and our
Absolutely.
occupancy of the municipal center and our use of the municipal center, to talk about the public impact and the public good with respect to moving the police department from the municipal center to Putney Road. So those are at least 4 sets of issues that I identified that were not specific content-related inquiries that were raised at the end of the meeting that I think we need to have broader discussions about, or at least opportunity to talk broadly about here. And then we're gonna have to turn to process in terms of how we're gonna present this to town meeting and, if possible, to the voters as a whole. So that's what I came away from Saturday's meeting with, and I just wanted to share that and to see if anybody else had any thoughts or comments about this.
I thought the meeting went great. I mean, I was surprised that, the amount of people that were there, and I counted 40, 45, somewhere around there. It was a good turnout. They had great questions. And actually, for the most part, positive questions. I didn't hear a lot of negative here. So they were good questions that really supported the project, I thought. So I was happy with the outcome. I'm hoping for more people at the next one, but.
Yeah, I just want to say, I agree with your suggestion that we find time during select board meetings to really to touch on those 4 points, David, that you mentioned. And it seems to me it would be helpful for us, just in terms of timing, to get through all 3 of our community discussions and then maybe look at dates. If we could tackle 2 topics during one meeting, we would probably be able to complete that by year's end, so that would be good.
And we've got meetings set every Tuesday.
We do.
We've got a
Now
lot
till
of meetings
Christmas.
like in the next couple of weeks.
So we'll try to get through those types of discussions.
Yeah.
Anybody else on police fire? Anybody on the board or anybody who's in attendance? All right then. Then, the next items on the agenda for tonight are the FY17 budget. And we're supposed to be hearing from Police Department, Public Works, and Rec and Parks. And I'm really gonna turn this over now to Town Manager, who I think has conferred with the departments about what's gonna be presented tonight. So Peter, tell us what we're gonna be doing tonight.
Sure. We're going to make relatively brief presentations. Each of the department heads will come forward and provide what they believe to be the highlights of what they're proposing for their departmental operating budgets for the coming year, and anything that is related to that in terms of current issues, challenges, achievements within the department to kind of frame the policy level consideration for you. And then we'll be available to answer questions either about those presentations or about any other aspect of each applicable budget. So we'll begin with Chief Fitzgerald in the Police Department.
Good evening. What I would like to do is start with a brief overview of the department, the makeup, and then go right into the budget, if that's agreeable. The Brattleboro Police Department and Central Dispatch is a full-service agency that operates 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. We investigate all crimes, misdemeanors, and felonies, process crime scenes, prepare cases for prosecution, ensure the roadways are safe by enforcing motor vehicle logs, log and store and perform forensics on evidence, maintain and store records, and dispatch for all emergency services for the town of Brattleboro. We are deeply involved with all issues that concern our citizens and work in collaboration with them for positive solutions. We serve a population of approximately 12,000 citizens, patrol an area of 32 square miles, and respond to over 10,000 calls for service throughout the year. The makeup of the department is authorized for 27 full-time officers, 8 full-time dispatchers, 3 part-time dispatchers, 1 office manager, 2 office clerks, and 1 animal control officer, for a total of 42 employees. In addition, we are augmented by one social worker from HCRS who works at the department 8 hours a day, Monday through Friday, and is on call. One of the major issues we are facing is in the hiring and retention of our officers. The Vermont Police Academy is a 19-week-long residential academy. They meet twice a year, February and August. We are always accepting application and hold interviews in December for the August Academy and in July for the February Academy. Successful applicants start working 2 weeks prior to their academy start date. Upon completion of the academy, the officer goes through an additional 12-week field training program at the department. The total training time is 33 weeks. Adding time for the interview, physical, academic, and medical testing, as well as the background check and polygraph, adds up to be 10 months between the interview date and the first workday as a trained officer. The cost to send a recruit to the academy is $40,167. The department is broken into 3 patrol shifts, days, evenings, and overnight, and 1 criminal investigation division, which is the detectives. The table of organization for each patrol shift is 1 lieutenant, 1 sergeant, and 5 officers. The shifts are 10 hours long and overlap during periods that historically experience a higher call volume. The workdays rotate for a 40-hour work week. Training, vacation, sick leave, and days off all factor into how many officers are actually working the shift for that day. The table of organization for our criminal investigative division is 1 lieutenant and 3 detectives. Their normal schedule is an 8-hour work week, 8-hour work day, Monday through Friday, for a 40-hour work week. At least 1 detective is on call 24 hours a day, 365 days a year. Central Dispatch operates 2 consoles at all times. They are broken down into 3 shifts. They work 8-hour shifts, and there is no overlap. Their work days also rotate for a 40-hour work week. The fiscal year 17 budget for the police was $1,956,573. That is an increase from fiscal year 16 of $2,074, or 0.1%. The operating lines that I would like to highlight are clothing. In our clothing line, we increased this due to taking the cost of replacing our bulletproof vests from the capital improvement plan and putting it into the operational budget. The vests expire every 5 years. Currently, we receive federal grants that pay for 50% of each vest. This grant is renewed on a yearly basis and is our hope that it will continue. In the future, if the cost of replacement meets the criteria for inclusion to the capital plan, this item will be in the capital plan. All of the years, it will be in the operational budget. Prisoner expense. This increase is due to the rise in cost for meals, laundering of the blankets, and the bug exterminator. The last several years have shown we are lodging a higher number of prisoners than the previous year. We are increasing this line in anticipation of this trend should it continue. Transportation. This line pays for the mileage to and from training to include the Vermont Police Academy. It is anticipated that we will be filling the 5 open vacancies this fiscal year. The fiscal year 17 budget for Central Dispatch is $459,099. That is an increase from fiscal year 16 of $3,668, or 0.8%. There are no operational increases to the dispatch budget. The total police department budget to include Central Dispatch has increased $5,742, or 0.2% over the FY16 budget. Currently, we have 4 active grants. The Governor Highway Safety Program for $41,900. The Mobile Data Training Terminal, which is a computer for our cruisers, for $4,500. The Justice Assistance Grants for $17,062. And the Community Drug Intervention Program grant for $60,000. Any questions on the police or dispatch budget?
We have, in the past, inquired about whether there's areas of overlap between various agencies and responses. The primary area that we've inquired about has to do with times when police and fire and rescue all respond to the same scene. I'm wondering to what extent that's being discussed as part of the comprehensive review, and what your thoughts are about how we currently deal with dispatching police, fire, and rescue personnel to the same scene.
That has been a concern, and it has, that question has been raised before, and it's my belief that what we get dispatched to is not always what we see when we get there. When we get dispatched to, let's say, a motor vehicle accident, it is unknown if anyone's entrapped. It is unknown if there's any dangerous fluids leaking. And I believe rescue, fire, and police should all be dispatched until it is determined what we're dealing with, instead of that time lapse that will happen if we happen to need rescue or fire.
You don't think there's any room for cost savings there?
I don't think it outweighs the problems or potential danger areas that we may encounter. When we're dealing with public safety, I think that it would be prudent for us to continue to do what we're doing.
And I'd like to supplement that by saying that I agree from everything that I've seen so far. It is something that we're looking at further together through the review, and we'll have something more conclusive to say together when we've completed the review. But not only do I agree with what the chief just said in terms of the importance for these kinds of emergency incidents to make sure that the right resources get to the scene, and you can't always be sure by how the call comes in and gets dispatched, exactly what those resources are going to need to be. That point is well taken. In addition to that, Brattleboro is really well served on a very frugal basis by each of the three separate components. So we're not fully and finally satisfied that there isn't an opportunity to collaborate in different ways that would achieve even greater efficiency, but the cost of the police department and in relation to the service that it provides, and the fire department in relation to the service that it provides, and what Rescue Inc. provides in terms of the town's share of that cost, all are very significant public safety services at relatively affordable cost compared to what I've seen in other communities.
Anybody else on the board?
I asked a similar question like that either last year or the year before, and I'm satisfied that it's in balance. And even having somebody, when they get there, have the first thing they do look for a leaking fluid is not really what you want them doing. You want them looking at the situation and how to intervene and save lives and protect people, so. Yeah.
Any inquiries about specific line items that anybody wants to ask?
We're analyzing something.
Would you want to inquire about it?
It's just the overtime, it just always.
Can you speak to us about overtime?
Sure. Overtime is, right now, we are currently 5 officers short, so unfortunately, we're using overtime for coverage. But however, that's for contractual issues with the courts, depositions, things of that nature, any major crime that comes up there, and of course, to cover for training, vacation, and sick of our officers.
So I knew that it was that, because we're down, that it had to affect it somehow.
It does.
Okay, that's what it means.
One point I'd like to make, because it's true in this budget, but it's going to be true in every departmental budget that you look at, so it's an important reminder, I think. We did talk about this briefly during the overview, but the salary information for each department in its departmental budget reflects the apples-to-apples comparison from FY16 to FY17 for the existing personnel complement. So it does not include any provision for any pay increases that we may grant for FY17. That is the $130,000 placeholder that's a separate line elsewhere in the budget and shown separately in the budget summary, so that it can be then allocated as may be appropriate once the decisions have been made, when collective bargaining has occurred and decisions have been made regarding possible raises for FY17. So as you go through and you see each department budget, you'll see some that are very slightly up and some that are very slightly down. The reason that they're all relatively flat is because it's the apples to apples comparison from one year to another.
Now, can I ask, I think this is more a fire department thing, so we'll have to wait. The town, and I could, again, this might not be the place, so we can wait, but the town, I think, currently gets around $32,000 through Vermont Emergency Management because of the Vermont Yankee Emergency Plan.
Right, this is the last year of that grant.
Right, so I'm
Right.
assuming that, is that somewhere factored in, or was it used to be factored in, or is it just because it's a grant?
There are activities that were funded by that grant that are not going to be recurring activities of the town. So there is some equipment that has helped us buy over the years. That's been really helpful in that regard. But as far as the operational impact of having to continue, we're not going to have to continue to do things
So we don't.
where
lose that
the
money.
activity was funded by that
Right.
grant. The money goes away, but the obligation goes away as well.
Right.
So, we don't see a material impact on town finances for the RERP grant
Right.
disappearing.
And I'm assuming, again, this is off topic, but since I'm thinking about it, and I'm assuming we're not gonna have to pay in any way for those sirens?
Actually, that's a current events conversation right now, and we'll have a board item for you shortly about that. We do not have to pay in any way for the sirens, and we actually have an option of allowing VY or Entergy to have them removed as part of closing down operations. They also have offered, though, that any community that wants to keep their sirens and take on the responsibility for them, if we see some other non-nuclear plant-related use for them, has the option to do that. Staff's reviewing that question. I'll bring it to you shortly.
I'm sorry to get off topic.
No,
I was just
that's
thinking.
right on spot.
Topic?
Yep.
Please. You spoke to wage increase money being segregated in a separate line and not being allocated to specific departments. It's similar for the healthcare costs?
It's yes and no. And for the healthcare costs, the only difference is that there isn't any apples to apples continuing service allocation that shows in any of the department budgets. It's simply a separate line in the operating budget under the general expenses of the town's operating fund. So.
And what's the change from FY16 to
Let's find
FY17, please?
That'll take me just a moment.
Page 7, I think. Up $66,000?
That is correct. That's the 4% increase. In the overview a couple of weeks back, I mentioned that we're going to have a 2.9% increase that we know is going to happen in the 2016 rates. It's a calendar year program. So beginning January 1st, the rate increase for the town will be 2.9%. The 4% overall fiscal year number allows for that second 6 months of the fiscal year to be an increase of up to 5%. The committee is working on bringing forward recommendations to the select board about how to modify the plan in ways that will avoid the Cadillac tax, but that may or may not result in a savings to the line item. It may simply pay for the benefit in a way that would not kick in the tax, or it may actually reduce the benefit in a manner that would create a cost savings, and we'll be back to you to address that.
Can I ask a
Did
clarification?
we get the answer about the overtime? Was there a discussion about overtime? I remember hearing the word mentioned. Did anybody talk to the impact of overtime on the budget and how fuller staffing will impact
No,
overtime?
we didn't get that far. We just talked about the impact on the budget.
On the budget.
All right, maybe
But not
someone
the
could
new
speak to
change.
overtime issues. Town manager or one of the two of you.
Sure. I'll give a quick comment because I also did want to comment on the point that the chief made in his overview regarding the overall challenge of staffing, at particularly our entry-level officers and the long lead time to get them prepared to be independent on the street. You recently have approved a recommendation that we brought to you. We're grateful for that because it'll position us to be able to strategically overfill at the moments when we are doing recruiting so that we won't have as deep a deficit as the year goes along in the 6-month intervals between academies. We've often been running as low as 22 or 23 officers out of the complement of 27. We want to keep that closer to 27 at all times. So there'll be short periods of time when we might operate with as many as 29 or 30. More often it might be just 28 or so, but we'll overfill above the 27 at the moment of recruitment when we have enough well-qualified candidates, so that with the expectation that in any given year we're going to lose 2 or 3, that we keep close to that 27 equilibrium. In addition to that, we're looking through collective bargaining with the police officers at the entry-level pay for police officers as it relates to entry-level pay for officers and other law enforcement agencies in our region. And we'll have recommendations to offer in the weeks ahead regarding that as a companion to the strategic hiring process, and all of which is intended to maintain a steadier, fuller complement of sworn police officers on the street. If we achieve that, and we will, by one or both means, then there will be less overtime other than that which is unavoidable. And the chief should speak to that about the kinds of incidents like we've had recently, where a tremendous amount of hours need to be devoted to simply doing the job well for the community. And so there are going to be times when we incur a lot of overtime just to do effective police work. But in recent years, we've been incurring a lot of overtime just to keep minimum staffing on the street for basic patrol. And we foresee that that cost is going to go, probably never be completely eliminated, but certainly going to go way down in the future.
I would like to expand on the town manager's comment on what we use overtime. Currently, right now, we're using overtime just to maintain staffing levels, and that's not what it was intended for. It's intended for the training, the sick, the vacation, and major crimes that we've had in the past 2 or 3 weeks. We've been, our whole detective division has been out flat for well over 2 weeks now. But also to do more of the crime prevention aspect of policing. If we can get out there and stop criminal activity before it starts, and very strategically and judiciously look at when and how we're going to assign our officers to those different assignments, using the different grants that are available to us to help us out, I think would be a win-win situation for everybody.
Can I ask a really stupid
Go for
question?
another.
God, you're,
No, this is a totally
you're on a
stupid
roll
one.
tonight.
And it just occurred to me, if the full complement of officers is 27, and we have like 23, I'm assuming that, and again, this is why this is stupid, we have the equipment we need for those 4, it's just sitting there, not doing anything. So we're not gonna have to buy new equipment if we go up to 27. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Okay.
We're down 5, so we have 22 on staff. If we don't have the equipment, it's already accounted for in other various
Okay.
ways.
Okay.
The only exception to that would be the personally assigned, the uniform costs that we incur and the other things that are just basic supplies for an individual officer. But the department's equipment that is necessary in order for the full complement of officers to be effective
We have- so we don't-
exists for the 27.
Okay, perfect. Yep.
I think when we voted on the expansion of getting more people on staff, that it really kind of shed a light to every one of us that it will affect the overtime, and it will affect, morale and everything else, associated with it, so. I thought it was explained very well. These two are having a sidebar.
Like we do.
The only significant increase in all of the line items
is for educational incentive. Can you speak to why that is? We'll certainly get a question about it
Okay.
going forward.
That was prepared by the Finance Department, that number, and it is anticipated that the next 5 employees that we hire will have a college degree, and with that, under the contract, they're eligible for that incentive.
Excellent. All right, that's good. Anybody else from the board have any questions?
Wait, I just want to ask something. I've always wanted to ask, but I don't know if it's you guys that do it, so you can tell me. No, every time John gives the report, I want to ask this question. There's always something in here about bike registration. It's like $10 or
30.
something. What is that? Is that, because I know you used to have to go to the police department and register a little Schwinn bike.
Yeah,
Right.
so,
You're the only one that did, that's why they got the $30.
well,
What is that?
so we've had a really healthy conversation around that. I do want to assure you that the comprehensive review is focusing on issues large and small, and
You've had a healthy discussion.
this is one of the smallest. Well, in fact, because we remember what you remember, so each of us remembers as a child getting the sticker each year and putting it on our bikes, and that program still exists. What we find is there's not much compliance anymore, and so we're not selling a lot of these. There's certainly far more bicycles out on the street than those that get registered. We've talked about whether it's worthwhile to keep it, and the answer, if I might put words in your mouth, the answer I get from the department is it's only $30. It's not that it's a reasonable revenue stream. We're certainly not going to increase it and charge children more to register their bikes. But it does provide an opportunity for those who do participate in the program. It provides an educational opportunity for the department to have some positive interaction with youth in the community. It seems to us to be something that is certainly causing no harm, maybe actually creating a little good, and from a revenue point of view, yes, it looks a little silly that it's a $30 line item, but we had decided not to eliminate it.
And your bike's registered, so if it gets damaged or stolen, and you don't know the serial number and it has that sticker, then we have that information.
Do people, do you do outreach so people know this? Not that I'm telling you should.
We
I'm just
have,
wondering.
we work in conjunction with Carol
Okay.
during the bike day
Yeah.
up at the Memorial Park, and that's a real positive interaction. Rescues there, fire, police, we all hand out helmets and do bike safety, and then we give them the opportunity if they want to register their bicycles.
I remember you just being scared that if you didn't register, you're going to be caught. You know
That's
what I mean?
exactly the conversation that we had.
But
It was
this town doesn't enforce that.
We do not aggressively,
Back then they did.
the aura around it in the 1970s was quite different.
They were really scared about it.
This is why Kate's on the
But
budget
see,
committee.
Peter remembers it too.
And so does Gunny.
Yeah, being scared about that. Okay.
Well,
So I have a question. Any idea how long it's going to take until you're fully staffed, given what you know about hiring and?
very good.
that's a very good question, and I would be happy if it was 18 months.
18 months, a good year and a half.
Right. Looking at the time span, we currently have 2 that are slated to go to the next academy. So that will put us 3 down, give the 10 months. Hopefully, we can get 3 in that, and then by the time they go to the academy, we're probably looking around the 15 to 18-month time frame.
You must be looking forward to that time.
Very much so, yes.
Anybody else on the board? Have bicycle registration to get over?
Kate,
I got my question answered.
Are tricycles included?
Yeah.
wait till she gets the fire. It's gonna be all over you.
So, if there's nothing more about police right now, thank you very much for coming and talking to us. The next department is DPW.
Okay, Kate, you're ready, it's Public Works.
Good evening, Steve Barrett, Director of Public Works.
Hannah O'Connell, Highway Utilities Superintendent.
So I'll briefly just kind of mirror the chief's presentation with a little brief overview of the department. Department of Public Works is responsible for the maintenance and repair and upgrade of over 60 miles of road, 30-plus miles of gravel road, associated storm drains, infrastructure, sidewalks, the parking lot. We assist with parking lots. We also assist with contracts for snow removal of those lots, the infamous traffic lights, winter maintenance, and then certainly the maintenance of those gravel roads in like mud season and other times of the year. We're also responsible for bridges in town. The town bridges, we're responsible for maintaining those and actually following through to make sure they're kept up with. Street signs and various other maintenance. We're also responsible for the utilities division too. There's 5 divisions within Public Works, and so the ones we're talking about tonight are the highway division and also our maintenance division that does the maintenance on the vehicles for Department of Public Works. And some of those positions are split positions. Myself, Hannah's position, our office manager. There's various positions within the department that service both of the divisions, both the general fund budget and also the utilities. But tonight we're here to talk about the general fund.
They said there are 5, so highway,
There's
maintenance.
a highway, the maintenance, there's what we call the water treatment facility and the personnel there. There's a distribution and storage, which is all the piping in between, water and wastewater, and then there's the wastewater division. Those are the 5 divisions. So in our budget, there isn't a lot of big changes, but there are throughout the line items as things change overall. It's the overall budget, I think, is a 0.09% increase. But one of the things I will mention is that we did increase the overtime budget, which is, if you look at the percentage, it's fairly substantial. But if you go back in the history, I don't think we've really funded that to the amount compared to the events that take place. And also, as the board recalls, we did increase our overtime to line stripe the town twice a year instead of one, which has been pretty effective, but there is a cost associated with that. So with this, we increased the budget to $90,000, but if you look back into 2015, $108,000 was expended, and if you go back to 2014, $107,000 was expended, and in 2013, $97 to $98. So I think we're just trying to get to that space that is of comfort, and we try to look at averages because some years there's more of an open winter, and then last year was an example of an extreme winter and an extreme mud season. So there's a lot of factors that play in. Equipment rental, there's the percentage is 6.3%. It's $1,000 on $16,000. And what we do is we rent equipment for snow removal. Again, we hire private trucking and also specialized equipment that we don't feel it's necessary to purchase, but we can rent that equipment, such as backhoes, special backhoes, ones that have tracks or other specialty equipment that we don't necessarily have to purchase, that we can rent and then turn it back in. It seems to be cost effective. Retaining walls, there's an increase there. I guess everybody's pretty familiar in this room about the problems that we're having with retaining walls, and so I increased it from 8 to 10,000. But that's more to deal with some of the walls that some of the smaller structures in town that we can look at and have some engineering to determine the safety or to come up with a plan. Street markings, we actually reduced that line item, and that's because the signs throughout town, you'll notice that we have been changing all the street signs in town over probably about the last 8 years. And we're starting to catch up. And what it is the lettering is larger, because I guess we're all getting so that we can't see these letters as well. So there's a whole program. We did it in-house, and we're kind of catching up on the project. So most of the street signs are done in town. So we're going to start to decrease that budget. Salt, last year took a huge increase. I think it was almost 50%. And that really hurts us. I mean, we're not really, over the years, our trend has actually been to decrease the amount of salt that we use and to decrease the amount of sand that we use. But with those price increases, as you can see, the budget for the salt's at $130,000. There's an increase of 10. But you'll also note that in 2015, we used $184,000. So that also is a moving target, but as I trended back, you go back to 2014, we used $116,000. And that's with not a sharp increase back in 2014. So I think this number is comfortable. That's what we want to live within, but it's a pretty big increase on my budget, or our budget, of 8.3%. Other than that, those are really the highlights, and I welcome any questions that you may have.
If I can ask some questions about status-related things. I saw that there was failing retaining wall maybe on Forest Street or Upper Forest Street. Has that been tended to, and if so, how? What kind of expenses
There's
gonna be?
just been an evaluation at this point. There isn't any more further information of what the next step's going to be, or how severe it is, or what the cost is going to be, or any of those factors.
Does it pose substantial risk at this point?
I don't think so.
It's a smaller wall. It's about waist high, but it is tipping out. You know, it's something that in the next fiscal year that we'll have to probably address, a minor repair. It's not large scale, but it's still
Noteworthy.
something on our radar, you know.
Has there been planning going on for the outflow pipe on Harris Place? That's something that's been on the list for years now.
Well, it's kind of been put on the side with all these other projects that we've had. We did meet with an engineering firm, and they gave us an estimate to do some of the work. And so we have a little bit more to do before we could actually come up with a program. But we haven't made a lot of progress in that area, and we're aware of that. It's just, the other projects have taken precedent.
But the Bonneville retaining wall is something that's made its way onto the capital budget for this
It's made it onto the capital, and Hannah, you can speak about that a little bit. We've got a full design, so.
We have a full design. The estimate at this point is over $200,000, unfortunately, a little bit more than we were expecting. I think that we're going to be able to complete that next year without fully going out to bid, but utilizing our forces and working with some rental equipment to get that done for a much lower cost. My plan is to, again, apply for a structures grant from V-Trans and see if we can get a little help on that this year, so, because we were denied last year, so.
And I'd like to just supplement that by saying that the number that's in the capital plan for that relates to the either-or kind of approach. Since we don't know whether we'll get the structures grant, we don't know whether we'll be traveling under those more stringent requirements of a state-funded project. I believe it's $157,000?
$150,000.
$150,000. The $150,000 that's in there would be sufficient to be our share towards a state-funded project, or sufficient, we believe, to fund work that we would do with our own forces and purchase the materials in order to do that work. So we're confident we'll get the work done next year.
This is just a Kate question.
Oh, you mean a good one?
A good one, yeah. No, because I can't remember. The reservoir, is there anything going on up there, up on, what is it, Forest?
Chestnut Hill?
Yes, but that's utilities.
Huh?
That's utilities,
That's utility.
yeah. But there is an active,
Okay.
just so you're aware,
Right.
if you,
Yeah, please talk to us
okay.
about it.
So as the
Your
utilities
utilities,
division's
right?
responsible.
Utilities, yeah.
Well, that's right, but a lot of times we don't discuss it unless we're in utilities setting.
Oh.
You wanna wait?
No, tell us. I think
No,
it's
I'll
okay.
tell you, so the reservoir itself, we've met with Du Bois and King Engineering, and they're gonna go into a final design. That's another one, we're gonna use our workforce. It's to install an overflow.
Right.
I remember, you went through the whole process, so that project hopefully is on for the spring. And that's been probably 5 years.
That's been at least five.
Longer.
But yeah, in Pleasant Valley Reservoir, that did get done with a tow drain, which is much more significant and a larger hazard of an impact, or a true hazard. So that went right to the top as far as repairing that first, and then Chestnut Hill will be second.
Well, I want to comment that the work that the department did on the Western Ave, Union Hill intersection has made a huge
impressive.
huge difference in safety at that location. It's way safer for pedestrians with the way smaller length of the crosswalk, but it's also a much calmer intersection for motorists. It wasn't clear that setting the intersections apart that way, of what impact that would have, but it's really had a positive impact. It's way safer to drive through there and way safer to walk through there. And I think the work that your personnel did was really excellent. And that, when combined with the installation of the flash pedestrian sign at the crosswalk at Belmont Ave, it's really been an example of the town responding to a number of difficult situations. There was a death at the Union Hill intersection, and there was a collision between a motor vehicle and a pedestrian at Belmont Ave. And we want to really thank you for the work at those two places. That's a real improvement in public safety.
Thank you.
Now we just need to get the bridge fixed
Yep.
at the bottom of Union Hill. That is driving people insane.
It's getting
There's been some,
That's next week's discussion.
that's next week.
I know, that's insane. That's just nuts.
Go ahead, Dave.
Steve, I know on the budget, I noticed a few things I just wanted to get some clarification on.
Sure.
On your staff salaries, the actual for last year was 529,600, and you're asking for 40,000 more than that for next year, and I'm wondering why it would go up that much.
Well, that's a good question. The finance helped with the salary portion of this.
Where are we? I'm sorry.
On 13 of
salaries.
18 staff salaries?
Where is that?
13.
Oh,
Page 13.
Yeah, but it's only $6,500 difference.
It's
It's from-
1.2%.
From this year's budget to next
From
year's
the
budget.
actual.
But the actual from last year, what was actually spent is 40,000 more than.
Right,
I
so
don't
that-
look at last year, I don't compare this budget to next
Right.
year's, I
That's-
compare the actuals.
That's that phenomenon that we talked about when we were talking about the staffing for the police. So when a position is vacant for a part of the year in any of the departments, then that line item will be underexpended at the end of the year.
And that's why this was underexpended last in 15?
There would have been a period of time when we were in transition with, from one staff person to another.
Yep, okay.
And so there was a savings, but there was also a workload issue. You'll
Yep.
often see, this is not that significant of an under expenditure for last year, or for FY15 rather, but if you see a more substantial under expenditure, you'll often see an over expenditure in overtime,
Yeah, well, and it's
a
obvious.
companion
yeah,
to
yeah.
it.
Yep, similar, not as much, but similar.
Right.
Yeah, and then, so I assume clerical, the same thing? Maybe it's, you're asking for 44 and it was, the actual for last year was 40,000?
He's right, there's $140,000, that's surplus.
Sorry?
It's $140,000, that's surplus.
Yes.
What are we looking at?
The clerical line, the actual was 40, we
Yeah.
budgeted 46 for this year, and next year we're budgeting 44, and I'm just wondering
Right.
why would the clerical cost go up? You know, that's a 10% increase.
They're going down salary to, in terms of fully funding the personnel complement, it's going down. We could determine exactly who was not there and for how long they were away, or how long the position was vacant, to tell you, why it was under expended the year
We had,
before.
the person was out for
But-
some period of time. We hired somebody else in, so that's the reason there's such a
But
big difference.
The actual
actual-
run rate for the town, the carrying cost of that position for the town has been reduced by a couple of $1,000s.
Okay, and then on the next page, it's only $1,000 with gasoline, but I noticed that that's up despite the prices, the cost of gasoline being down, and diesel as well. In this case, it's $10,000, which is significant amount of money.
I can speak to that one. That was part of the budget instructions for all the departments, was to increase that line item, because remember that this budget won't begin until next July 1st, and then it'll last for 12 months after that. So we're really talking about the cost of gasoline, six to 18 months from now. And our expectation is it will be higher during that window than it is today.
Well, the reason I asked about that, and I'm hoping that we can make some adjustments there, is that our fuel costs are one of the few energy areas that have actually increased. So at some point when we get to talking about those kinds of things, I want to talk about how we can reverse that.
Sure.
And get some ideas. But again, I'm not seeing signs that it's going to go up, but you never know.
Well, on that note, we do have, we purchased some economy cars, with high mileage for the maintenance. They'll share the engineering tech's car, which is a small compact. So we've made some changes there as far as, the type of vehicles that we use for efficiency. The other thing that's happened is on some of the pickup trucks, we converted back from diesel to gas because we really weren't getting the efficiency or the payback on those vehicles. Diesels are pretty good, if you're going to go hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles, or you need the torque and the power. But in some cases, we've been better off using gasoline, so you see a slight increase with the gasoline to catch up with actual usage.
Does Tesla make a grader?
I wonder if they make a police cruiser.
How many graders do we have operational right now?
2.
We have one, but we're going to have one here very shortly that's brand new.
Right.
So we have a used one. How old is it that's operational?
That one
Approximately
is probably 15 years old.
15 years old. Great.
What's the lifespan?
15 years old.
When's the new one coming?
We have a new one coming?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, the new ones just should be here.
Colors.
Guilford's gonna borrow it.
We have to let them have it too.
I know, they've given us theirs.
2000.
A lot.
That's 10 years.
It's a 2005, so it's 10.
All right. Other questions from anybody on the board?
Well, just
All
one-
right,
I have a
Dave's
question.
got
I think
another?
I just have one more. Well, I've got another fuel, actually, a lot of fuel expense. Again, on 14 of 18, Public Works yard expense fuel, 21.6 was the actual from 15, and now we're asking for 16.8, so it's going the other way. So
Yeah, and actually, I went back on that, and 14, we used 20,928.
That's also heating oil as opposed to gasoline or diesel.
Yes.
So that's reflective of the really great price we got last year. Remember, we took the budget down by, I think it was $60-some-odd thousand, and we're
Yeah.
having to increase it by about $40,000 this year and catch up. So that's
And
part of that.
have we seen the fuel cost increase, the heating cost increase?
Again, this is
yeah, but I'm wondering what's indicating it.
we're actually trying to predict, which
Yep.
is impossible, but
Yep.
you do the best prudent job we can at positioning the town to be able to afford heating oil for the winter that's going to begin 12 months from now.
Right.
And given the fact that we got the lowest price we've seen in many years for this winter, it's only prudent to have it be somewhat higher. What the increase we went to was not as high as what had been originally budgeted last year before the reduction at the 11th hour.
Yep.
But is an increase over what we're actually paying this year.
That's it.
Donna?
I have a question, and it's more of a big picture question, but with the cost of salt and sand, it's a huge expense. And I'm just wondering, you mentioned that you were using less,
Yes.
and I know you're keeping the roads safe. So my first part of my question is, how are you using less salt and sand and keeping the roads safe? Second is, in terms of future planning, are there communities or locations that have similar weather to southern Vermont that have infrastructure that would potentially replace the need for salt and sand? I know there are some places probably with less snowfall and maybe not as cold temperatures that install some heating mechanism that dissolves ice on the streets, or is there anything we should be looking at down the road that could potentially be longer lasting and not have that necessarily expensive?
Well, there's a few tools that you can use to combat ice. As far as the first part of your question, we calibrate all our salt applicators now. Years ago, you would put the salt in a dump truck and you just kind of guess, and you put the spinner on it and, boy, it's colder, let's spin some more, and now there's actually science applied to it. The highway supervisor has a temperature infrared gauge that he can use to check the roads. Each of the salting units has a calibration, so you're putting out X number of pounds of salt per mile. So now, using science alone, that that if you're using 300 pounds per lane mile, that's a proper application. You don't need more. So there's some things that we've done there that have had big changes on how we operate. The use of sand and the use of salt. We try not to use sand in the town on the paved roads unless we absolutely have to. And the reason for that is because once you put the sand down, then you have to pick it back up
Right.
in the spring with the with a sweeper.
Yeah.
And also gets into the storm drains and plugs up the storm drains, so you have to clean those. So it seems like a better process for us and more cost-effective to use the salt on the paved roads. We don't use salt on the back roads, on the gravel roads, because it has an impact and it affects the gravel roads, so we use strictly sand. And with the sand on the back roads, we're actually using a larger stone, okay? So it actually adds more material to the back roads versus just putting a fine sand on that can wash off. It also helps with vehicles because you have a bigger stone, so it
Traction.
gives you more traction, and if you have an ice storm and such, you still have a buildup of the stone. The other part, to answer your question on this, we've used other types of treatment processes. They have what they call ice melt. They have calcium chloride. They have all kinds of other products. And someday we hope to be able to use a mixture of these products. But that's going to take that bigger picture of the public works having some kind of storage capacity to add a liquid to the salt
Yep.
so that we could apply a salt in more of a brine. Okay, so then when it's colder, we can deal with ice at lower temperatures, and we can reduce that amount of salt. Instead of 300 pounds per lane mile, we could go down to, say, 2. So there are other products. We've tried them. We've
Yeah.
brought them in, experimented with them, had success with them. But then, we're limited on our resources to utilize those products. But that's what we've done, and we look at the future. As far as the last part of your question was road surfaces and such, they have experimented with different types of hot mix. They had like what they call the popcorn mix, which is more open and granular to have the water go down through the asphalt so that it wouldn't freeze up as quick. Well, the problem with that, after they tried that, was it took more salt to melt all the water when it went into all those nooks and crannies, because there was more solid ice mass there, so it would take more product to actually melt it. And as far as heating and those type of things, we haven't seen anything like that. So pretty much we're dependent on these other type of products.
Donna, global warming should probably take care of it.
Yeah.
It's going to be oceanfront property in
That budget line will go down.
Yeah,
Where
we'll
does
get
our
that a
salt
lot.
come from? Where we
Ours come from, there's mines over in, I'm not sure if it's New York or, they truck it in by train, and then it's put into a depot, and then it's trucked down by trucks to our facility. There's a depot actually in Bellas Falls.
Thank you, that was
And
all.
with, all our salt goes on a state bid. We just write off the state bid, which helps the town
Yeah.
get a better pricing.
Yeah. Thanks, Steve.
Yep.
Other questions from anybody on the board? Anybody who's in attendance have any questions for Public Works? Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Parks and Rec?
Carol Alott, Recreation Parks Director. Going to follow the method that's been put before you already. And I'm going to start with a nutshell approach to the department. And I know most of you have been sitting in your positions for a while, so you don't need anything bigger than a nutshell. With that being said, the Recreation and Parks Department has 9 full-time employees. We utilize 40 seasonal employees during the winter months as well as the summer months. In addition, we utilize hundreds of volunteers to help us run our programs, and we hire program instructors who are contracted service providers who are not town employees, but they provide a valuable service to the community. We have several programs. We have 9 youth sports leagues. We have 20 after-school programs for youth. We have 15 adult leagues and programs, 15 special events, and 30-plus programs for senior citizens, including special events. In addition, we coordinate numerous activities and schedule facilities with 13 different community organizations. And we take reservations in 16 different facilities, both indoors and outdoors, everything from meeting rooms to the Brattleboro Common and our various parks. As we get into the parks, we maintain over 130 acres of parkland, which includes playgrounds, buildings, and utilities, in addition to the grass. The areas include 12 mini parks, 5 traffic islands, 5 cemeteries, and all the facilities within Living Memorial Park, including a 300,000-gallon swimming pool and skating facility. On top of that, we're responsible for the maintenance of the inside and the outside of the Gibson-Aiken Center. This year, I am proposing for the FY budget, a budget of $782,262, which is a 1.1 increase over fiscal year 16, which relates to $8,445 increase in our operating expenses. I'm not going to go through and highlight line item by line item where the increases were, because they are all pretty consistent. They're either fuel, electric, utilities, or propane, except for in one case. You know, when we're talking about employees, the majority of the employees that I hire, when we're talking about 40 people, they're high school and college kids. So what I'm constantly have for a challenge is keeping up with the minimum wage. So that's where you'll see a small increase. Some of it, in some cases, I'm able to absorb that increase within the existing budget, but there is a small increase of $500 in the skating rink staff salaries line item, and that's what that reflects, is trying to keep up with those increases. Other than that, it's a level service budget. Our expenses increase, as I said, of $8,445. This is when you're supposed to cheer, so I'm just giving you a prompt. Our revenues increased of $12,800. Okay, woo-hoo, this is okay. All right.
You've been at this too long. You don't cheer.
Excuse me, I know. That's why I prompted you. A net gain of $4,355. So that's, in a nutshell, what we're doing and where we're headed.
I'd like to add one thing to that before we get into the interactive part, which is just to highlight that, back to this discussion that we had a minute ago about the fuel expense and the catching up from the good fortune that we had last year to be able to do a last-minute reduction in the budget. That in this case, the fuel expense increase at the Gibson-Aiken Center is $9,750, and Carol's overall proposed department budget increase is $8,445. It is, you know, everything else, including all the personnel costs in the department, or the total of every other line item is a reduction from last year. It's just the fuel that's causing the increase.
And we're talking, once again, about the fact that last year, at the very last minute, we were able to bring in our 2016 FY fuel at like $1.99.
$1.97.
$1.97. And we can reasonably anticipate that at the very least it's going to cost $2.10.
Yeah, we're actually predicting $3. It was $3.50 was the estimate a year ago, and then it went down to $1.97. The figure that we've used for the projections in this budget are $3.
Hopefully it'll be.
Curious where.
And hopefully we'll do better than that.
I'm curious how you come up, I mean, looking at, I mean, this is a geopolitical question. Looking at the way all of that is trending right now, how do you come up with that number?
Again, the issue is if we were looking at what are we going to be paying for fuel oil in February, then looking at some really tangible factors and being able to tell you exactly how it's calculated would make it easier for you to say, hey, that makes sense, or no, you haven't considered something else. I can't tell you that it's been calculated like that. What I can tell you is we're trying to protect the town from the complete unknown of where oil prices will be 12 to 18 months from now. And so we're putting in what we think is a prudent amount. It's not as high as what was forecast a year ago, but it is 50% higher than what we paid for this particular winter. If we get to a very favorable price again, then there'll be a substantial savings for the town, and those funds can either be returned in the form of a tax rate decrease or redirected to some other purpose for the taxpayers.
I'm looking for ways to cut now. It just seems like that's.
Yeah, I think it would
I
be.
mean, I understand the prudential part of it. I just think that there's just, I mean, short of a war, going to war with Russia, there's really not much on the horizon that's going to be pushing those prices up. Everybody that's producing is continuing to produce. But anyway,
Well,
it's an unresolved.
That's why they call it a projection. I mean, I agree,
Yeah.
but it's a tough one. I mean, I wouldn't want to be somebody that has to project that far out.
Yeah, and I feel comfortable, and, we're gonna talk about this more, I know, but I feel pretty comfortable, given that we consistently come up with a 1% or maybe a little bit more surplus at the end of every year, to maybe hack away at some of those projections that are prudent, that are maybe more prudent than they need to be, given a realistic look at the impossible future, or the possible future. But not for, we have to do that tonight, just expect that later on in the process.
I'd like to address just the methodology, because I understand, Peter, that when working with the department heads, there may have been more uniformity this year with respect to gasoline and fuel oil than in the past. So if you could please speak broadly to the methodology that was used across departments.
Sure.
In estimating costs for gasoline and fuel and propane.
Sure. So the 350 from a year ago was the aggregate impact of each department doing their own estimating. The $3 was a figure that we provided at the outset of the budget preparation this year to the department, saying if your usage is expected to be more or less the same, if you haven't done something in your facilities that would cause you to think that it's going to be materially more gallons or fewer gallons, then take the gallons you know you're going to need in an average winter and multiply that by $3 a gallon, and that'll be your fuel figure. We did similar things with gasoline estimates, diesel estimates, and utility costs. So in the exhibits section, I think it's actually the very first exhibit. There it is. So if you were behind the exhibits tab, the very first few pages are my September 2nd memo to the department heads, which will tell you exactly the assumptions that we made, the direction that was given to the staff, and the preparation of those kinds of line items.
Other questions?
No, the only thing I want to say, and we haven't heard from everybody, but I really want to commend the department heads for really coming in with, bare bones budgets. And, I know we don't say it enough, and usually we're picking apart every little thing this time of year, and, with the help of Peter and Patrick and everybody else, it just seems like they put a lot of thought into it. And other than the fuel that we really can't, that's just a commodity you can never tell where it's going to go. I'm impressed with the numbers that are coming in. So
I think we just need to squeeze people for that bike registration.
Yeah, there's so many more bikes and bike paths.
Other questions or comments from anybody on the board?
Thanks, Carol.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So maybe, Peter, just before we break, if you could talk about how the budget discussion is going to unfold going forward.
Sure. Next Tuesday, we actually have a very full slate of regular town business to conduct. So we'll be taking a week off from budget consideration. 2 weeks from tonight, we'll be back with 6 different departments. The smaller departments of the town will be presenting, and the fire department is one final large department, and then all the smaller departments. And then subsequent to that, whether it'll be the 15th or whether it'll be the 22nd or exactly when it'll be, depending on what calendar you want to keep, since by the time we get out to the 15th, it'll be 9 Tuesdays in a row. So thank you for all the overtime that you've been putting in. But at some point before we wrap this up, there'll be an evening when we'll review the town manager's office budget and all the global items, the townwide general operating expense items, the debt service, those pieces, and then start working our way towards the policy decisions that you'll need to make in order to be able to come to a final recommended budget for town meeting.
And it also seems fair to say that unless we're planning to go back to the well and start talking about service cuts that really haven't been talked about this year, savings would come from applying the extra surplus and whatever changes are going to happen in the solid waste budget.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Agreed.
All right. Any other comments from
Which we
anybody
should have
else
an answer on in a couple weeks. I know.
as to the solid waste part of it? Right. Any other comments or questions or anything to talk about for tonight's select board meeting? We're ready for motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion to adjourn. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, and we oppose or abstaining, that carries 5-0. Thank you, BCTV operator. Thank you, members of the press. Thank you, ASL interpreters. Thank you, everybody who's been in attendance and everybody who's been watching on TV. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thank you.